NXT starts off with Lash Legend versus Nia Jax. They end up having their one-on-one match. This match was an absolute banger. This was a great match. Very shocked on how good this match was because these are two women who are very similar in terms of the wrestling style, them being these big, dominant powerhouses, them typically working a slower style match. I was very I was very contemplating on whether or not this was going to be a good match due to their styles not being able to work together, but their styles worked perfectly together. This was a very slow-paced match, but it worked very well. Towards the end, we had a very cool spot where it was an announce table spot where Last Lady was trying to pick up Nia Jax, but Nia Jax was too big, where Nia Jax ended up just falling over. The impact of her body ends up slamming Lash Legend onto the announce table, which I thought was very slick. They ended up doing a close 10 count spot. Both wrestlers get in the ring, but towards the end of the match, we end up getting Lash Legend tries to do us like a power bomb. She was towards like the turnbuckle, but Nia Jax, they end up repeating the spot they did similar to the announce table where Nia Jax was just too much, too big, and she ends up just slamming down onto a Lash Legend. She ends up hitting the Annihilator. Then she goes back on the top rope, hits another Annihilator, and picks up the victory. I like this. I like the way they did this. I like the way they executed. This was a really good match. And plus, Lash Legend has a reasoning to a degree to get a rematch because she could easily say that, look, she had Nia Jax beat and that Nia Jax got lucky, so they could easily play that into the story. I like what they're doing. This feud has been really good. I did not expect the match to be as good as it was. I'm assuming they may have another match at Heat Wave, but who knows how that's going to play out. But this was a really good way to start the show. I am enjoying what they're doing with Lash and Nia Jax. Hope this really elevates Lash to another level. Hopefully they elevate her into that main event picture eventually after this feud. But this has been really good. The women's division in general needed a feud like this. I really enjoy what they're doing. This was great. This was great. This was better than I expected. I did not expect this match to be as good as it was, but this was an absolute banger. I can't see what they do next. Afterwards, we end up getting Charlie Dempsey versus Joe Hendry. I'm not going to go that in depth on this. Joe Hendry picks up the victory. The match was really not that long. So I don't know what's next for these guys. I don't really know why we needed this match. I mentioned this last week when they had this segment. It didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense now. Don't know why we needed Joe Hendry on the show because it served no purpose. It didn't move any story. It didn't move Charlie Dempsey's story or Joe Hendry. So don't know where we go from here. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say here. Like, I'm hoping Charlie Dempsey has a story because I think Charlie Dempsey is really good, very underrated. I think he could play a really good heel. If you really build that story, he has easy motivations of his. You can easily just tell the Tatum Paxley storyline. All of his friends and family leaving him. You had Tavion Heights leaving him. You had Miles Bourne. You could eventually have Ren Sinclair leave him. You could easily tell a heel story right there. He could be one of your big heels in that mid card. So or in the main event scene when Javon Evans. I'm assuming whenever Javon Evans wins the NXT champion, he could be the next heel right there for Javon Evans to face. So you could put him in either way. I hope they push him. I highly doubt it because it's clear that they don't have really any motivations to push Charlie Dempsey, but we'll see where it goes. Don't know what Joe Hendry is going to do. Most likely Joe Hendry will continue to go after the TNA championship, so we'll see how this plays out. We end up getting a Josh Briggs promo. He ends up mentioning Inamura. He ends up basically saying Inamura is selfish. He only cared about himself. And that he ends up saying during their friendship, Inamura only cared about chasing after the NXT championship, and he did everything he could to make sure he was the NXT champion. Then he ends up mentioning Inamura's code of being a man of honor. He ends up saying that that's not going to get you anywhere in NXT, that everyone knows that the way to get to the top is by playing dirty, and that he's going to prove that by having a street fight next week. Inamura comes out, says a few words, they brawl, Inamura ends up standing tall. Interested. Well, I'm not really interested because I really couldn't care less about either of these two guys. The street fight should be a fun match, should be a very fun, entertaining match. So let's see how that goes. I'm assuming Inamura is going to win that match. I think it only makes sense. And plus, that the fact that it's a street fight of all stipulations, I'm assuming that has to be the end of that feud, and I'm hoping it is because I really don't want to see neither of these guys on my television streams, especially in a feud. I don't have nothing personal against them. They just not my cup of tea when it comes to just as overall wrestlers. They're good in the ring, but character-wise, they need a lot of work. But it should be a fun, enjoyable match. The crowd was into it, so the crowd liked it. So very interesting. I don't know why I keep saying it's very interesting. It's not interesting to me, but we'll see how this plays out. We eventually do end up getting a tag team match between Lola Vice, Kalani Jordan versus Family Influence with JCJ and Fallon Henley. This was a really good match. Really enjoyed it. You end up getting Kalani Jordan end up picking the victory. Lola Vice and Kalani picking the victory. Kalani ends up getting a pinfall over JC Jane. Getting the story of Lola Vice, Kalani getting along, telling that friendship. You have them going back and forth, talking about how they're each gonna go after Jacy Jayne for the NXT Championship. They're clearly telling the story of the downfall of Jacy Jayne and Fatal Influence. They're constantly disrespecting Jasper Nix. Jasper Nix is kind of getting a bit more irritated with Fallon Henley and Jacy Jayne. Getting Masha Slamovich, and getting um I forgot. I know her name is Dana Brooke, but I'm trying to think of her TNA name. I can't think of it's something. I think her name is Ash of Elegance, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but they have them in the crowd watching the match. Her potential opponents of TNA. I think they're gonna have a triple threat match at Heatwave, if I'm not mistaken. Which I'm assuming Jacy Jayne is gonna win. I like what they're doing here. The only thing is, where's Jada Parker? Because this whole entire thing literally started with Lash Legend and Jada Parker first. Them having matches with Fatal Influence. Jada Parker won her match, and now there's no mention of her in the NXT title match outside of this backstage segment that she had on tonight's show. But now Kalani Jordan pinned the NXT champion, so where does that lie? I don't know where this is going when it comes to the NXT Women's Championship, but I do like the revolving door of Lash, Jada, Lola Vice, Kalani. I like what they're doing here. Very interesting. Very interested to see how this plays out. Don't know what they do with the TNA Women's Knockouts Championship, but I could easily see Masha Slamovich being the one to throw her at a TNA pay-per-view, because I highly doubt they're going to have her lose the TNA Knockouts Women's Championship at Heatwave. I just don't think it makes much sense. So I'm very interested how this plays out. But the main event scene in the women's division is looking great. We end up getting a quick match between Apple Fire and Kendall Gray. They end up pushing this story, a segment where Chelsea Green is trying to figure out who is Tavion Heights' woman that he ended up picking to go after Chelsea Green, and they thought it was Kendall Gray, but they end up being proven wrong, because after Apple Fire picked up the victory, Tavion Heights ends up coming out, ends up revealing who was his who was his woman he chooses. He ends up choosing the LFG winner, Tyra Steele, if I'm not mistaken, that's her name. Very interested to see. I was very interested to see where she was going, because they was pushing Jasper Troy out of LFG, but they didn't push her. Now it looks like she's finally getting her push. Very interested to see how this plays out. So I'm assuming eventually we're going to get that mixed tag team match between Ethan Page, Chelsea Green, Tavion Heights, and Tyra Steele. It was a backstage segment between Ethan Page and Chelsea Green, where they end up was stressing out, worried about this, the pairing between Tavion and Tyra, because both of them being Olympic gold medalists. Very concerned, but they end up coming up with the solution of having a peace treaty next week, which we all know is going to fail. Very interested how this plays out. I never thought I would be interested in a Chelsea Green and Ethan Page pairing. Never thought I'd be interested in that, but the pairing of them two together is amazing. The gimmicks that they're playing with this Canadian act is amazing. It's great. Can't wait to see how this plays out. Probably will be a heat wave match, if I'm not mistaken, and if it is, I can't wait to see how that match plays out. But this is great. I love what they're doing with this. I love the whole Canadian gimmick that they're both playing. This is really good. Can't wait to see how this plays out. Now we get the main event. We end up getting Javon Evans, Obafemi, Moose, Trick Williams versus Darkstate. Really good main event. This was a really good main event match, 8-man tag. Towards the end of the match, you end up getting a moment where before we get to the end of the match, context, you end up getting a moment where all of the participants on the babyface sides kind of ended up accidentally attacking each other. You end up getting Moose accidentally spearing Obafemi, if I'm not mistaken. You end up getting Oba accidentally attacking Javon. This allowed Darkstate to get the upper hand. They ended up hitting their signature, powerbomb, but it was a moment where Trick Williams could have got in the ring, tried to prevent it, but he ends up stepping down and ends up not preventing the powerbomb, and Darkstate picked up the victory. Now, some people are using that as an excuse to say, well, Trick Williams has to be the leader. Trick Williams could be the leader. I just don't understand why he would be the leader, because he doesn't really need Darkstate, and Darkstate hasn't really helped him in any way. So it doesn't even make sense for him to be the leader, but if he is the leader, I wouldn't mind it. Now, I will say this. It makes sense for him not to help, even if he's not the leader, because it was a 4v1 situation. If Trick Williams tried to help, he would have just got jumped. And two, it was Javon Evans, who is facing him next week to be the #1 contender for Obafemi NXT Championship. So why would he help Javon in that situation? He could just have Javon take the pin, get hit with a powerbomb, make sure he's more weakened for their match next week. It makes sense. Then it ends with Hank and Tank comes out and attack Darkstate. I like what they're doing here. I'm glad they're finally putting Darkstate back on TV. Darkstate has a lot of potential. They could be easily one of the main things on NXT in that main event scene. Love what they're doing here. Love what they're doing in the backstage segments as well, because they're finally figuring out something with Jay Cutler, because Jay Cutler was easily the odd man out, and each member has their own thing. You have Saquon Sugars, who is easily the most developed out of all of those guys. He easily has the most swag and the most natural like confidence about him. He's easily like the most ready in terms of just overall performance and character wise. You have Lennox, who is the more passionate, overly aggressive guy. Then you have Osiris, who is easily the powerhouse, and Jay Cutler was easily the odd man out who didn't have his own thing. Now he has his thing, which is just saying sus things, accidentally saying sus things in segments, which is hilarious. He did it last week and he did it again tonight, which I really enjoy because his stuff is hilarious. I hope they continue to have this be his stick, where he just continue to say sus things in his segments because it's hilarious. Overall, this was a really good show, and next week is looking like an absolute banger of a card as well. Can't wait to see how this plays out. But you guys let me know your overall thoughts, opinions below. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. But yeah, that's it.